unpacking today's headlines. This is Souls and Liberty in Depth.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to In Depth, a production of Souls and Liberty. 75 days to go until the election. But before we turn our guns to that, look at this. This is the face of the Son of God at the instant of his resurrection. It's a composition created by AI using what science has proven from the Shroud of Turin, the burial cloth of Jesus Christ. Call it a human intelligence meets divine intellect moment. The image was made by a radioactive blast of light so intense that the ability to reproduce it is unknown in the universe, and there was no accompanying heat. Had there been the corresponding heat, science tells us the shroud would have been vaporized in less than 1/40th of 1 second. We put all of this before you to remind you that in the midst of all of this evil, God is in charge. And speaking of evil, let us pivot now to the Democratic National Convention, which wrapped up its third night last night with the parade of billionaires telling us to hate Trump and abort our children. That about sums it up. Joining us today, our Trey Traynor of the Federal Election Commission, appearing, however, in his private capacity as a citizen and fellow contributor, Stephen Wynn. I'm your host, Gary Michael Vorse, coming to you from Houston. Trey, let's start with you. The DNC, as the Irish would say, it's a shite show.
Well, it was very interesting last night. What's most interesting about last night is last night was remarkably similar to the first night in that the entire focus of the convention seemed to be on the issue of abortion. And for me, this issue, the focus on the issue of abortion shows just how desperate the Democratic Party is to hold on to their base. They absolutely are concerned about losing their base. They've had to run through all of the unions, which are traditionally Democratic supporters. They've had to run through all of their core constituency groups and make sure that they have time on air, on stage, to make sure that they stay on board. They're so afraid of losing just their core base that they haven't really been able to do any outreach.
Yeah, that's very insightful when you think about, you know, what's their self-view. Stephen, you know, even CNN is calling out some of their lies and even attacking their strategy. Like, what are you doing here? CNN.
Right. Yeah. Honestly, I don't know where to begin. Yes, CNN did that, and that was good, but I wasn't impressed. You know, the few falsehoods just that they exposed were so egregious that really no one could deny them. Most of them involved Project 2025, which one of them being that Trump himself authored the document. He didn't. What I've been just astounded by, you know, far more than the lies that have been exposed, are the distortions and the deception that has gone unmentioned. You know, I mean, outside of conservative circles, you know, the talking heads all three nights, they've said nothing about Walz, for example, and his whoppers, his pathological propensity really to peddle falsehood. You know, nothing about his the claims regarding his military service. You know, that he rose to the rank of command sergeant major. He didn't. That he used weapons in war. He didn't. The fact that, you know, he's claimed on multiple occasions that he and his wife that they conceived their children through IVF. They didn't. You know, the fact that he lied multiple times openly during his initial congressional campaign about his 1995 DUI arrest. You know, he basically stated that claimed that he was not drunk that evening, that he just couldn't hear the instructions during the sobriety test. Total falsehood. It's just the ignoring of the records of both Harris and Walz by Democratic leaders, by the establishment media regarding, you know, issues, massive failures that they know that, you know, if they explored, if they talked about, would really prevent most likely Harris Walz from assuming the White House. And the one bit of truth, the one statement of truth that I heard came last night when Walz was wrapping up his acceptance speech. He said that if he and Harris win the election, they're going to fight to ensure that, quote, the government stays the hell out of your bedroom. And that is 100% true. It goes to Trey's point about just this open parading of enthusiasm surrounding the abortion issue, and as well, I think, all things LGBT.
Yeah, it's since Wednesday night, last night was Walz's moment in the sun. Trey, it looks like, because everybody's kind of like puzzled and scratching their heads, like, why would Kamala pick him? Well, I think as you see more and more of him, even when he walks out and he's kind of got that like dumpy, like middle-aged man carriage and waving, and he kind of looks like a dork. What he looks like, and I'm not saying that to be insulting. He doesn't strike you as a strong man, and I think as I'm looking at it more, it looks to me like she picked him precisely because he would appeal to beta males, to like the low testosterone crowd. He looks like a dork. He may, level the charge weird against JD, but, what was the logic for her picking him? Everybody was scratching their head. Now, the more you see him, you're like, all right, this is the appeal. There's a guy on the ticket that little beta males can identify with and take some of that white male vote away from Trump. Anyway, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think that there definitely is an effort to try to pull white male votes away from Trump. But if you look at just the focus of the number of times that the Democratic National Convention has mentioned Donald Trump's name pejoratively, as the end-all be-all, the incarnate of evil in the United States who's going to end democracy. If you look at that focus, that tells you exactly where the Democratic Party is today. They do not have a policy going forward for this country. They don't have anything that they can point to that the American people can stand behind and support. Therefore, they have to demonize, they have to tear down, and ultimately that's what they're doing. So in picking somebody like Walz as their nominee, he fits that bill perfectly. He comes from a background of a student of socialism, a student of communism who enjoys traveling to China, praises all things communist that he possibly can. And by doing that, they knew that they would get somebody who could go on the attack against Donald Trump, against J.D. Vance, and continue this attack that they have, because that's all they have to run on right now. They can't run on the policies of the Biden-Harris administration because the policies that they have enacted are a failure. They've torn down the economy. The policies that they have tried to enact with regard to the border are a disaster. We have people flowing across the border. It's ollie oxen free as far as people coming across right now, and we have more illegals in the country than we know what to do with, and they think Donald Trump's evil because he wants to get some sort of an accounting and send people back. But at least Donald Trump is putting forward a policy of, hey, let's count how many people we have and let's send them back. That's at least a policy that Americans can look at and say, okay, I can or can't get behind that. Now, to his benefit, most Americans are behind that. By large numbers, including large numbers of Democrats.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think it's a surprise when you returning to the thing about, the attempt to get white males away from Trump. Again, you don't have to get 90% of them away. It's just you're peeling off little bits here and there of different categories. White male being, a pretty sizable, contingent within the Trump camp, Trump base.
Well, it's a sizable contingent, and it's one that they're scared that the overwhelming majority, including Democrat majority of white males, will turn and vote for Trump. It's what scares them most about, there's this rumor going around that on Friday, RFK is going to drop out of the race and that he's going to endorse Donald Trump. That scares them because that gives a free pass to Democrats, people who've long supported the Democrat Party, to join in supporting Trump. And so it does, in fact, scare them. And again, going back to these themes all week, I mean, they have to hold together all of their coalitions, and they can't lose any number of their coalitions. Whereas the strategy on the Republican ticket is we only need to make very small gains in some, not all, of the groups that the Democratic Party has put together in the 2020 election. So Donald Trump has a focus of, I only need to get a small percentage of the African-American vote. I only need to get a small percentage of the college-educated female vote. He doesn't have to go and garner all of the support of those groups. Whereas what we're seeing from the Democrats and what we're seeing by the message that they're putting out in Chicago is they have to hold on to every single vote that they have in all of their coalitions. And therefore, they have to kowtow to each one of them. And sometimes it's been very difficult for them to do that. Last night, we saw, they had a family of hostages in Israel on stage. At the same time, outside, you had massive protests of anti-Israel, pro-Palestinian groups. I mean, they have to have one foot in each camp, and the duplicity is going to be seen by the American voter.
Yeah, just to remind viewers here that remember back during the primaries when Joe Biden was campaigning in Michigan primary, that an enormous number of folks in Dearborn, Muslims in Dearborn, and Palestinian folks in Dearborn voted non-committed or whatever it was they did. They didn't cast their vote for Biden because they're making a protest vote against those policies. Well, I mean, if you're a Muslim sitting in Dearborn, Michigan, and you're on the phone with your friends and family and everything else, and everybody else who goes to your same mosque, and you're saying, hey, look, they're supporting Israel right there on the stage. I mean, it isn't even a case that they have to vote for Trump, which they wouldn't because Trump's pro-Israel. It's just they sit home. And if that happens, and, it's these little itty bitty things here and there, how much is the Catholic vote going to move in Trump's direction compared to what it did in, 2020? How much is it going? How much would the Muslims stay home? Stephen, let's switch to you and staying on this same topic of Trump's strategy. He keeps his base. His base is like insanely loyal. It's not going anywhere, and they're loyal to him and his vision. It seems like the base of the Democrats is just loyal to the idea that we hate Trump and let's abort our children. But in the world of social media, again, you go on Twitter, and I'm going to talk specifically here and get your reaction to the reality of what keeps popping up on X. You see video after video after video, not just black males, but more black males than females, who in very, shall we say, colorful terms, are very explicit that, screw the Democrats and Trump's my man. That has got to be concerning to Kamala and crowd.
Oh, yeah, I think so. And thank God, literally, for X, because, I mean, it's really a lifeline for truth. I think things would be lost if we, didn't have that platform. Every vote is going to count, and it has been fascinating to see the parade of renunciations of the Democratic Party by minorities in this country, especially among African Americans. And so I think that trend. That is very much unsettling to the Democrats. And speaking of just X, to underscore Trey's earlier point, he was spot on in his analysis. There were folks at X who basically went back and analyzed the number of times Trump has been demonized during the past 3 nights. And he was mentioned, obviously, always negatively, over 150 times. Whereas the word economy and border, they were used in the single digits, basically. So it just shows again the Democrats do not have a policy that's going to count, and so they're just trying to quietly ignore Harris's record, the fact that they don't have a prescription to get us out of the mess that they themselves have put us in. And it's very telling. Now, hopefully, a lot of people will read through the lines, basically. But I'll tell you, I've been watching the convention, trying to watch it, forget what I know about Harris, Walz, et cetera. I've been trying to watch it from the perspective of an undecided voter, a moderate, independent. And I will say that on the surface, I think a lot of it is pretty effective, at least for the folks who don't frequent X a heck of a lot, or who don't read conservative periodicals and that kind of thing. The Walz, for example, you touched on his persona. We see him as just this dork, basically. But I think a lot of people out there are there's a danger that they're buying into this persona that he's this folksy Midwesterner, America's dad, America's coach, the dad in plaid, and the reality beneath that is he's a very wicked, very dangerous man. But you're not going to hear that outside of conservative circles, basically. He's a Midwesterner, but so is Saul Alinsky, and he's a Midwestern Marxist in the same vein, basically. So I don't know. It's just been interesting watching things unfold, because it's all stagecraft, obviously. It's been just a long program, an exercise in deception. I just hope enough people are going to be able to see through it.
Yeah, Trey, let's pick that up with you also. I mean, is the convention of joy, where all we do is just, scream and yell about Trump and tell people to hate him and everything, and do it with a smile and cracking jokes and being dorky and goofy and the whole bit. And, and we know tonight we'll be treated to lots of cackling when Harris makes her speech or acceptance speech. Do you think that's a sell with enough people? Yes, some people are going to buy it because they hate Trump. But is that enough of a sell? I mean, 2 weeks from now, 4 weeks from now, 6 weeks from now, when all the early voting has started, are people going to be like, yeah, I really like the way she laughs, and he's like America's coach, and he's pretty cool and all that. And by the way, let me put like $3.50 gas in my car again here in a gallon and think how much I think they're so full of joy. Is that going to work? Is it going to sell?
Well, I think what you're going to see, and I've maintained this, and probably, Jim Ellis is probably the better person to analyze what the actual numbers say on this. But at the end of the day, I think that you're not going to see a massive boost coming out of this convention that you would normally see. Obviously, the Republican Party saw a major boost coming out of what was a very unifying convention that was very focused on policy, very focused on moving forward with an agenda for the country and an American first policy. Here, you still have yet to hear a cohesive policy come out of this Democrat convention. I've attended conventions for 20 years. The big thing that happens at most of these conventions is you put together a platform for your party, whether it be the state party or whether it be the national party. Even coming out of the Republican National Convention about a month back, there was talk about what does the pro-life plank in the Republican Party platform look like. Yes, it's still pro-life, but how pro-life is it? Are there exceptions? These are policy discussions that normally take place. And people get behind a platform and move forward in support of a candidate. And here they don't have that. They don't have a solid platform. In fact, they're still debating on what they may have passed something that's called a platform, but they're still debating what do we actually stand for. And it's funny that we call it stand for, and that you mentioned earlier, do people sit back and take it? Last night, there was a sit-in held by the uncommitted delegates to the convention who said, we don't have a pro-Palestinian speaker on the agenda and we want one. And therefore we are sitting in, we're boycotting the proceedings so that we can fight to have a pro-Palestinian voice on the Democratic National Convention stage. They wanted it on the same night that you have Jewish parents who have a son who is being held captive after the October 7th terrorist attacks in Israel. There is no platform coming out of the Democrat National Convention. It's just not going to happen. there's no unifying force. The only unifying force is a hatred of one man. And that hatred, unfortunately, has led to all sorts of bad things being projected at Donald Trump, both literally and figuratively. And it's one of those things that we have to be concerned about that's dividing this country, is the focus of a hatred of one individual as the embodiment of a political philosophy, and he's not. There are millions of Americans who believe he's just the voice of those millions of Americans. Right. And Kamala Harris has not been able to give voice to an opposition policy-wise. She has a tough row to hoe tonight to come up with policy statements that the majority of Americans can get behind.
Well, she's going to lie. I mean, that's what she started doing. She's pivoting and she's lying. And, we're going to give you $25,000, for a down payment on a house. We're going to stop price gauging, as she calls it, at the supermarkets and bring the price of groceries down. She's going to go, we're forgive your student loans, blah, 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 money, 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 here, vote for me, vote for us. But one of the things I find very interesting, just sitting back watching all of this, is the contradictions on stage, left and right, that they have billionaires. There's this parade of billionaires coming up on stage telling all the poor people that we need to tear down billionaires. Hey, what? And they had the sheriff on last night from the border county in Texas, who was like, I support, Kamala Harris, blah, blah, blah. Meanwhile, within seconds, boom, on X, up goes the video of him doing TV interviews last year saying the Biden-Harris, border policy sucks and, they need to get down here and fix this. And so, immediately there's just one contradiction after another, after another, after another. And of course, you're going to see the same thing, hear the same thing tonight from, cackling communist Kamala.
At the end of the day, they have to come. They can't talk about what their real policies are because they're not accepted by the majority of Americans. Right. Nobody thinks that Build Back Better has done anything to build back the country better. In fact, it's driven us into economic decline. We have unemployment numbers that have had to be recalculated. We have employment numbers that have had to be recalculated as unemployment numbers because the jobs just don't exist. I mean, there you have the government making up numbers to try to prop up an administration. Now it's been exposed that the jobs really aren't there and they can't hide it any longer. And my only hope, my fear here is that there's not enough time between now and Election Day to expose all of the duplicity, all of the lies, all of the fabrications that are being made about this. Kamala Harris is trying to rebrand herself as a middle of the road candidate. I think that's probably why they rolled out Bill Clinton last night, probably the last of the real middle of the road candidates that they had. I mean, you put welfare reform in place. He was tough on crime. Kamala Harris is not tough on crime. Kamala Harris is not going to do anything to reform the welfare state. In fact, as you pointed out, she wants to increase the welfare state by handing out as much money as possible, right. Whether it be handing out $25,000 for houses or handing out money to people as they come across the border here illegally, where she has done nothing but fail miserably as the borders are.
Yeah, it's the same question right back to you, Stephen. They have to lie, and Kamala's speech tonight has to be full of lies and mischaracterizations, and as Trey rightly puts there, a rebranding that has no basis in reality of herself.
Right, exactly. And my concern is that none of this is going to be challenged in the establishment media. So we'll be having tens of millions of Americans watching tonight that aren't prompted to think critically if they're not already. And that's very effective. We see that same sort of silence, the obfuscation of truth, of fact, kept Biden in office and on the ticket for 3.5 years. And so I'm concerned that this kind of thing could ultimately deliver her to the White House. We'll see. But yeah, there's no way that she can run on her record. She's not going to give any detail this evening. It's just going to be more of the same, happy, feel-good, feelings-based statements that really don't pertain to reality at all. I mean, the one policy prescription that she's floated out recently, price controls. They preach that they're on the side of the poor, on the side of the middle class. That's going to devastate rural and inner city communities. The independent grocery stores are going to be shut down within a year because they can't compete. And who does that hurt? Poor whites in the rural areas largely, and poor blacks and Hispanics in the inner cities. Mm-hmm. And so there's a massive disconnect between what they actually do and what they actually say. And that's what I find so maddening in watching all of this. When I was a boy, I remember my father, even during the Clinton administration, as Trey said, he was comparatively moderate compared to, when you look at Kamala today. But he would be yelling whenever a Democrat would come on the television out of frustration. Yeah. A few choice words. I get it now. I didn't understand that when I was young, growing up, but I get it now because that's what I've been wanting to do the past 3 nights, and I'm sure I'll have to stifle a few choice words myself this evening when I watch.
Oh, let them fly, Stephen. Come on. You may have to have a bottle of bourbon or something beside you for tonight to just sort of numb the pain. I mean, that's
right, exactly.
It's going to be awful to watch. Trey, any closing thoughts?
Well, again, my thought, first of all, the critical day for everyone in America is this campaign, this election. Everything really starts Friday morning. How this is spun by the liberal media is going to be important. It's going to be important for those on the right to push back against that narrative that comes out of whatever happens tonight at the convention. Ultimately, if this election comes down to a discussion of issues, I think ultimately the Republican Party wins the election across the board, House, Senate, and the presidency, because they actually have answers to policy questions that concern the American people, whether it be the economy, the border, healthcare issues, all of those things. They've at least put forward policies for people to discuss and to have an opinion one way or the other. And it's not about an emotion, about a hatred of one individual, or an emotion of hope or change, or all of these feel-good terms that they have out there. So it really, everything starts on Friday.
Yeah, it does. And of course, Friday is supposed to be the RFK announcement. Well, there is going to be an announcement. He said that. What that's going to be sure sounds like he's going to say the Democrats did everything they can to screw us over. We can't run an effective campaign, and therefore, because that's the kind of people they are, we're throwing our support behind Trump. Let me ask you, Stephen, I'm going to come back to you, Trey, right after that. What do you think that means if, in fact, that is what happens, which looks like that's what is going to happen?
I will be very happy, very excited if that happens, because I think the Democrats, the left, they have such a massive ability to craft a false narrative, which they've been doing since Kamala's coup, basically, and before that with Biden. And so I think every vote is going to count in November. And even if RFK is just getting a couple percentage points, basically, you think that may be enough. That may be enough to secure the election on November 5th for Trump. Obviously, not every RFK voter is going to go that way. A lot of them will probably just sit out the election in frustration. But I think if he gets behind Trump, that's going to make a lot of people, it'll push them over the line, basically, and hopefully push Trump into the White House on November 5th.
I mean, Trey, we'll leave the final thought on that to you, just as in sort of a predictive fashion here, a prophetic fashion. I don't see how that doesn't help Trump, and I don't see it not hurting Kamala. It's got to.
Well, as I stated earlier, the RFK endorsement on Friday, if it were to happen, would be a clear signal to Democrats around the country that it is okay to support Donald Trump for president. those that believe in an American first agenda, those that believe that jobs are important, those that believe that the economy is important, those that believe that closing the border are important. If those are the top three issues, and what we see in most national polls is that those are important issues, it gives them a clear indication that it's okay for them to also cross over and support. It also shows you the type of governance that you would get from a Trump administration when he talks about welcoming the support of somebody like RFK, recognizing that he is somewhat quirky, but is somebody that he could also work with. He's talked about the potential of having somebody like RFK in his cabinet as somebody he can work with. So you look at the promises that were made by Biden and Harris to bring the country together and work across the aisle. And here you have an actual crossing of the aisle, the Democrat crossing over to support a presidential nominee, and that presidential nominee embracing that and saying, yes, there are areas where we can agree on, and we're going to agree, and we're going to work for the betterment of the country. So I think it can be nothing but positive, and it definitely has to be something that worries the Democratic National Convention.
Yeah, it's going to be, you've got Kamala's, all praise and blah, 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 and then essentially her speech is over, they all go to bed. They wake up and all the attention is going to shift to RFK, not just a potential endorsement, but what he says in that endorsement, praising Trump on these issues. I love the memes I see going around on X right now saying Trump should make him director of the CIA so he could finish what JFK had started. Ooh, smoking hot with that one. Guys, thanks very much. Great insights as always. We'll be checking back frequently, as we always do, as the campaign moves along. Thank you. Before we leave you today,
Thank you.
Evil has no existence of its own. It's entirely dependent on the good. It cannot create. It can only mar and deface and corrupt. That's what we see with the Democratic Convention. There is nothing of the good actually advanced, only destroyed. Think of it like a hole in a shirt. The hole itself has no existence apart from the shirt. It's entirely dependent on the shirt for its existence. Evil's a parasite. It lives off the good. It's why the beloved disciple John tells us at the beginning of his gospel, the darkness could not comprehend the light, and the darkness could not overcome it. Light and darkness are opposites, that's true, but here's the key. They are not equal opposites. Light is always more powerful than darkness by its nature, as well as the nature of darkness. Darkness scatters when the light emerges. The opposite is not true. Light does not fade when darkness approaches. It's why the Son of God rightly calls himself the light of the world and instructs us to walk in that light, him. Imagine the moment of the resurrection in the dark of the tomb. It was only dark because there was no light. But at the moment of that radioactive blast of light energy, all darkness was obliterated, overcome by the light. And here's the point. It did not challenge the light. Darkness did not challenge it. It was simply defeated by it. God merely allows darkness, evil, to have its moment, as he told Judas at the moment of betrayal. Evil has its hour, but God will have his day. So take heart, all of those of you who are weary with all of this evil. We must undergo this. Our duty is to walk in the light and bring the light into the darkness. In our day-to-day existence, this is a fight, no doubt, interiorly as well as out there. But remember, Christ our light has already conquered. All we have to do is correspond ourselves, our lives, to his victory. Live on in his light and go out and fight. God love you. I'm Gary Michael Voris.